All right, welcome everybody. This week we're going to be working on Unit 2. And in Unit 2, we cover basically the Chapter 2 contents from our textbook. And this chapter, as I mentioned, is the chapter where we learn all the fundamentals of HTML, all the core concepts and how it works, and all of the most important tags that you use over and over and over again. We're going to be doing kind of a combination of lecture and demo, so I will have the author's PowerPoint on the screen as kind of a guide for talking about things. And then whenever they talk about certain types of code, my aim is to demonstrate it. My hope is that as I'm doing that, that you're following along. So you're coding with me. And if you do, I mean, in essence, if you follow through the class today, you will have basically completed or come really close to completing this assignment here, which is the HTML5 basics assignment. So we'll talk about all that stuff, how to turn in the homework and all that. I usually also do a thing during this week where I normally check to see if people are having issues with FTP or if they need help with it. We can reserve that to the end of the session at this point, or we can always do a one-on-one Zoom if absolutely necessary. All right, let's just take a look at our topics for the week. So as you guys will notice, I mean, basically we're looking at chapter 2. So like you could pull up chapter 2 from the book and go through the stuff following along with the book or the PowerPoint and kind of end up in the same place. And normally what I try to do is throw in a couple of other auxiliary topics, as you see here, like choosing an editor, what editor to choose and why, right? And we did a little bit of this already. Of course, my strong recommendations are that you use either Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code. Seem to be kind of the two most, I think, effective tools. Visual Studio Code, of course, is better for cross-platform people. So if you are on the Mac OS or a Linux OS by chance, I do get students that do that, by the way. That's probably your better tool. Notepad++, to my understanding, is I think it's either Windows or Linux only, and I'm not really sure about the Linux part because I don't think I've ever used it on Linux. And the reason is because Linux usually has great text editors built in already. What tool you end up choosing to use is highly subjective, and I say that over and over again. And I'm not here to dictate that you must use this piece of software to do the work. I don't operate like that personally, and I think you'll find something that suits your style or your techniques or your operating system or whatever your thing is. You just maybe think it looks better, or the workflow is better, whatever it is. You'll have your own personal reasons for choosing a tool. My job as an instructor is to show you as many of those tools as possible. So we will have some talk about that today. To do the work that we're going to do here in class today, I have some basic precepts, and the one is that you kind of get the file management piece. So we talked about that a lot last time. You're like, oh my God, when are we going to get to coding HTML? But file management is super important, especially when you really start building pages. So like being on board with that is critical. Knowing how to hide and unhide your file extensions on your OS is important. Then the tool, right? So like, I suggested again, Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code are both good products to start with, but I will point out others, and you might like those others way better. Usually by the time I dig pretty deep into the course, I'm coding with whatever my favorite tool is at the time. And for quite some time, it's been Adobe Dreamweaver, because that's kind of what I always use professionally, real honestly. And in some ways, I still feel it is the superior product, especially when you're doing visual front ends and tying into servers directly and databases, because it has the mechanisms built in to just deal with that elegantly. Not to mention CSS tools that are so amazingly easy to use and powerful that it might just be enough to sell you on their product suite alone, And then there's always the factor of like, what do pros actually use out in the field, right? And this is a big area of discussion too. And in most design houses, Dreamweaver is still the top product, and on a Mac platform on top of it all. Not that you have to know the Mac platform to run the Adobe products. You can do it just as well on Windows. All right. A couple other things that I always circle back to, and I push these pretty heavily, is some of the resources that you guys should really be looking at. And of course, our top resource, and I pointed it out every week so far, is this one here, which is W3 Schools. W3 stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. They're the official standards body for the internet, so they set the rules for HTML. And so I always say, where's a better place to learn about how to do HTML than the people that set the rules for it? And you might want to bookmark this or just remember how to get to it, but w3schools.com is the site, and I've been here before with you guys. And of course, they have tutorials on all these different languages, and regular programming languages, but mostly for server and client-side technologies, predominantly for web. So, the main areas I think are probably the HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript areas where this site is the strongest. Another reason this site becomes really important to us as coders for HTML and CSS is because they have code validation tools on this website. And I think I have a direct link from the course shell. So you notice here at the bottom of the topics how I have this link where it says validator.w3.org, and I'm just going to take us there. But this is a site where we will go and either via entry of our URL, if it's already on a server, uploading a file, or copy pasting our code right into their window, which is my favorite approach. We will check to see if our code is valid. And then I got to teach you how to do that, because that's not really clear, right? But a very important tool, because here's what happens if your code isn't valid. It might not perform or act correctly on people's devices. So we want to make sure we have valid code. This is the website, so you want to bookmark this one too. And if you don't remember it, I'll be real frank. I don't bookmark these because for W3 Schools, I just go to a browser and I type W3 and it just pops up, right? Or if I want to validate, I just type validator, and before I even finish the word, the link's up on the screen. So, and you've been there a couple of times and it'll auto-populate for you just the same way. All right, let's then take a really quick look at one other resource I want to point out that's really important, and one that I want you guys to take advantage of, because this is normally a very expensive paid service that people don't know about or are reluctant to pay the money for because it's so expensive. And that is this thing called LinkedIn Learning. Now, for those of you not aware, LinkedIn, and you say just type in the URL. So this is the main LinkedIn website. LinkedIn is basically the working professionals, this is a better way to say it, the working professionals social media platform. So anybody that's working in the US in a professional position, usually related to technology, by the way, but it can be other professions too, create profiles here on this service. They connect with other professionals who work in their fields. Sometimes recruiters come to this website to look for people with certain skills and hire them. Or you can do the converse, you can look for the positions here as well. And it's kind of a weird platform. And I think it's really kind of interesting, is this is a company that was very important, but it was not a profitable IT company. This is what I think is pretty interesting. But yet Microsoft went ahead and purchased LinkedIn for billions of dollars. Mind you, a company that's not even turning a profit. And it took me a little bit to kind of go, like, why would Microsoft spend all this money to buy this company? Okay, great, it's social media and people put all their personal info on here and stuff. Why would they spend the money? And I was like, duh, they just bought all the, professional work history of anybody that's willing to put it on there. And they have a database of it now and they own it. Isn't that kind of interesting? So should that dissuade you from being on the platform? Absolutely not. And why this platform is really important. I'm going to just think here. Let's see if I remember. There he is. Okay, so here's one of my former students, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me putting him up on the screen, but here's one of my former web students. So he was in the web program just like you guys were. He had done a little bit of HTML before he got here, so he knew a little bit about coding, but not a lot. And while he was in progress working on his degree, we had an employer in the area come to us and say, hey, Ty, do you have any really sharp web students that are looking for work? And so I announced it in my classes. Jason's like, I just lost my job or whatever. I need something. Can you hook me up? And I'm like, sure. Made a connect. He got hired. Okay. So, I'm going to pause the recording here for just a second because he probably doesn't want this in the recording. He got hired at a very attractive rate of pay. Stayed with the company for a while. They built out this product. The company ended up, it was a venture capital company. They ended up selling out their product. They got bought out by a different firm. And then he was looking for other work again, right? So he did this project for a few years. He updated his profile here on LinkedIn. And maybe I'll just click through here. All right, well, that's his picture. All right, so, and his wife, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what he changed. And I think it was just some of the wording down here in the About section. And I want you guys to look at like what he has in his About section, right? Creative full stack web developer with demonstrated history of working in the marketing and IT industries. I have a diverse set of skills ranging from HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, Next.js, Gatsby, and React.js. And some of that stuff you might have heard of and some you haven't. But when he got finished working with that first company, and I think he just added this to the profile. The next day he had a job offer here in town, not like somewhere else, here in town in Racine. Starting, the offer was $30K over what he was already making. He countered and got more. All right, so I'm just kind of putting it out there. So there's actual like real money to be made here, right in our back door. And I'll be frank, I'm not sure he ever finished his degree. I'm not sure that he actually earned it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. That's not even the point. But LinkedIn is an important platform in that regard because people get jobs out of it and they connect with other people. So as a student, what I'm going to encourage you guys to do is you should set up a profile here, even when you're a student. Get a nice picture of yourself, talk about what you're studying, when you intend to graduate. And then when it's time to go look for work, you're all set to go here. You can just say, hey, I graduated, here's my skills. You put it out there and start looking, and people find you here and they consider you to be sort of real. All right. So aside from LinkedIn, I know, so my grand point of talking about this is, well, I push the social media platform a little bit because it can get you work, by the way, but also because they own a secondary company that's related to it. And the company used to be called lynda.com, Lynda with a Y, right? And for anybody who used to like maybe try to teach themselves how to code online. So if you like maybe have done this, right? How to make a web page. People do that search and they find these videos on YouTube. And a lot of the videos that you find sometimes come from professional firms, but they're these little snippets of videos and you don't get all of it. You just get the piece you were looking for example. But if you'll notice here in our course shell in the left sidebar, we have a link to LinkedIn Learning, which is the new name for the lynda.com platform. It has been for about 4 years now. And what LinkedIn Learning is an online self-study video course platform. And particularly if it's technology or IT related or graphic arts or computer related somehow, some piece of software or whatever, they have complete courses on it. So for example, if I come up here and type HTML, they have 43 courses, not videos, courses on HTML alone. All right, we're learning HTML5, let's type HTML5, right? So I'm gonna type that in, and they have these courses. So if you wanna learn how, for example, how to do geolocation with HTML5, which you can do, by the way, right? Where you can find yourself on a map. It's just an API that's built in. Here's a video about that. If you're learning how to develop, and I'm looking at like Okay, fundamentals of HTML, CSS, and frameworks. Let's just click on this one.
Now I'd like to dive into the backbone of the web, which is HTML, CSS.
All right, so I'm not looking to play this video, but I'm demonstrating the product. But in this case, you have these full course presentations that are broken down by topic. And so I'm just gonna click into it, and I'm really more to demonstrate. I'm not gonna play the video, but you can see that it's fully transcripted. So everything is closed caption if you have that issue. You can click on the transcript here, and there's a complete text of every word he says. And you notice how they're all underlined too? So I can jump, like if I want to go right to this thing that he's saying, I can click on it and it takes me to that spot in the video. Really cool, right? The other aspect of this, and I'm trying to get into the mode, and I'm not sure I'm hitting it here. Some of these courses will have this, this little side panel where you can kind of, let's say you don't need this part, but you need this piece or whatever. You can dive right to the content that you need. You see how long each video is. Often there's exercise files that come with, so you can follow along with what the person is doing. All right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the way that LinkedIn makes their money is you either buy access to a course, which costs I don't know what, or you get the subscription, which is 60, 70, 80 bucks a month, and you get access to everything. And why I love this, right, is no matter what school you go to and what course of study you have, you're never going to cover all the stuff that's in that topic area in an industry. It's just impossible, right? Plus stuff changes in IT all the time. So if I'm going out for a job interview and let's say they're searching for this skill, Vue.js, that's a thing. It's a JavaScript framework that's getting pretty popular. And they're like, man, this job that I'm going to go interview for, they're talking about Vue.js. I've never done Vue.js. I better study up on it a little bit. Here's a place you can come and study up and do it pretty quickly, and at least walk into the interview and talk intelligently about this thing you don't know. And that, hey, I did a little bit of self-study on it. Totally impresses people, by the way, that you would take it upon yourself to learn about a technology that you're not employed in. And I'm a fast study, and I have all these tools that, whatever, and I can learn it, and fantastic, right? But the thing that I think is pretty fascinating, I'm trying to see if I can find the one I'm looking for here. Maybe I'll find it, maybe I don't. All right, I'm not finding it. But anyhow, we do have one of our instructors, Christian Hurd, some of you guys might have classes, that creates videos for LinkedIn and Pact Publishing and a couple others, right? And that's just one of his side gigs. But the content here is fantastic, folks. You got to check it out. You pick a topic, like if you want to learn how to use, like I talked about Dreamweaver, right? If you want to learn how to use Dreamweaver, okay, well, here's courses on Dreamweaver. You want to learn how to use Photoshop, because we really don't do that in the course. Here's a place to go learn it. Heck, you want to learn how to use Excel or Word or PowerPoint, all that kind of stuff. It's all in here. And while you're a student at Gateway, you have free access to everything in here. Take advantage. Okay, so that's why I pointed out. I do suggest in our course shell, and I'm not sure where, that if whenever you're studying any of this HTML stuff and you're maybe stuck on something, it doesn't hurt to get a different perspective than what I'm presenting to you or what your book is presenting to you or whatever you're finding online. One person can explain something one way and it might not resonate with you. You just talk to somebody else and they use a different word in the sentence and it's like, oh, I get it, right? And so that's really, and that's on you, right? So I can only teach you my way so much. The rest of it, you kind of have to open your own eyes to it. And hopefully, and my sincere hope is that you have within yourself the impetus to discover on your own, right? Because that's how I did it, right? I knew very little about HTML. And then before I knew it, I was a freelancer making all sorts of money doing it, right? And that could be you. All right. So that's LinkedIn Learning. Please explore it. And I think that's pretty darn helpful. I am going to pull up the chapter 2 PowerPoint right now, and I'm going to start going through the slides. My intent is to talk about how to code HTML and demonstrate it at the same time. I think Vidal, I think last week we decided that that new HBO show, House of the Dragon, right, the Game of Thrones follow-up, it'll be my topic for the semester. And of course, they had another episode last night where the characters suddenly were 10 or 20 years older or something, which was a little bit weird. Still cool though, right? Except for the Doctor Who guy, he's still him, right? Which I was thankful for. All right, so that's kind of my goal for the day. So I'm pulling down the PowerPoint. This is right in the topics here. If you guys want to download it for your own purposes, feel free. You do not have to, by the way. And you'll notice I'm not editing these. I'm not going into slideshow mode because I do plan on flipping back and forth between my coding editor and PowerPoint quite a bit. I do plan to cover all the material in here exhaustively because it's important. All of it is important, frankly. Some more important than others. We had a little tiny bit of a preview at the end of last week's class. So if you guys remember, we started building a basic HTML document. And so we're gonna get a little bit of repeat, but the repeat's okay because that's how you get it to stick, honestly. All right, so where we're gonna start before we do any work, before I start doing this, like this, you know, I'm thinking of like the old Charlie Brown cartoons where the teachers or adults start talking and it's like wah, 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 and you fall asleep, right? Okay. You might fall asleep while I'm talking, maybe you won't. And Antoine, you have a question. What is your question, sir? All right, so what we're gonna do first here is we're gonna start with file management. I think that's kind of where I was kind of alluding to things because we're gonna start writing code. We need to have a place to put it. We are working in Unit 2 right now. So I'm going to go to my folders where I store my work for this class. So I do that on my Google Drive. You might do that in your documents folder or your OneDrive or whatever. And I have a folder for this class. So I have a 152-101. And all right, I see I have a folder for summer, but I don't have one for fall yet. So I'm going to make a new folder and I'm going to call it 2022 fall. That's my naming convention. And inside there, so normally you guys would have like Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, right? And so we're working on Unit 2 today, so I'm going to create a Unit 2 folder. So here's Unit 2. Notice no spaces, no uppercase. That's my convention for doing web work, especially static HTML work. And then inside this folder, I know that I'm going to be working on a chapter case study and my HTML basics assignment. It's two different assignments in here, both creating web pages. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a separate folder for each. Here's the why. Because what is the default name for a home page in HTML? We learned this last week. How do you name your file? Index.html. So every website has one of those. So I can't have two in the same folder. And if I name it like index.html basics.html, and that's not going to work. You know what I mean? So it has to be exactly index.html. So what makes a lot of sense procedurally is, for example, I'm going to create one folder called HTML basics, and I'm going to create another folder with the name of the case study I'm doing. Most of my students tend to do Java Jam or Fish Creek, by the way, but you are welcome to do any of the case studies. So if you want to do one of the others, but whatever case study you pick, that's the one that you're going to be doing all the way through the course. And I think they have like 3 or 4 different ones. So let's just say for the sake of it, I'm deciding to do Java Jam. So I'm just going to create a folder called Java Jam. Do you guys notice how I named that? I didn't want to use a space, but what did I use instead? Dash. Yeah, that's my convention. All right, so I have one folder for each. We're going to start our work in the HTML basics folder, and that's where all the stuff I'm going to do during my demo and my lecture here today is going to go into that folder. But you see how I'm being preemptive about creating the file and folder structure, so I'm ready to work, then I'm not doing it later. It's not an afterthought, it's a forethought, right? Critical for web people. If you know where your files are, and when you move it to the server, it follows. You know, so okay. File management first, folks. All right, so looking at this PowerPoint, which mimics all the book's topics, here is a list of all the learning outcomes for this chapter. So this is all the stuff that we're going to learn how to do. So some of it is informational, right? But anywhere where you're saying like use or configure or create or code or any of that stuff, we're writing code. So there's a lot of hands-on activity here. So another really critical piece right now is like we got the file management piece out of the way. Now we need to think about what tool we're using today, right? I am going to be using Notepad++, all right? If you want to use Visual Studio Code, it's on you to follow through. What I will give you is a couple of tips though. File management first, create your folders outside the product is usually my recommendation. With Notepad++, and I'm going to create a new document here, so I apologize. You know, the way that we're going to start out is we're going to do a save as to create the index.html file and put it in that folder. So that's what I'm going to do first. Then I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code and show you how to do it there as well. But most of my demos today are going to be inside of Notepad++. Okay. So in Notepad++, I've created a new document, and my thing is, you know, you create a new document, first step is save as immediately. And that's a really hard one to learn, but you need to learn this one because these editors do not autosave by design. If they do autosave, it's an afterthought. So coders have to know to save their work. Don't count on the fact that it's going to save it for you. All right, so going up to the file menu, I'm doing a save as. I'm going to find that same location, which for me is on my G drive. I have my web one course, my fall folder, unit 2, HTML basics, right? You can see that whole pathway I have here. Then I'm going to click into the file name and I'm going to name it index.html, all lowercase, precisely that, not one letter can be uppercase. And I'm going to hit save. All right, so that's Notepad++ to create the file. Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to bring up that product. So I know a lot of people like to use that. So let's demo that. And I think we kind of went through this a little bit last time. So I'm going to close the stuff that we did last time. But what I want to do here is they have this little file explorer tool in their sidebar. You see how I'm clicking that first icon and it brings up this navigation panel. And what I really want to do here is I don't want to use this Unit 2 folder from last time. I'm actually working in a different folder. So I want to come in here and I want to actually attach to a different spot. And I'm trying to figure out even how to do that. I mean, because I don't use this product. So, all right, let me see if I can figure this out. Let's, we're going to open a folder. There we go. So I went to the file menu and chose open folder. And what I'm going to do is find that same folder that I was just working in. So there's web programming, fall, unit 2, HTML basics. And I'm selecting this folder, and then that's the folder that we're looking at here in the sidebar now. Notice there's already an index.html that I created in there. If I double click that, it will open up here in the editor blank. Right. So I'm going to leave it here open, but I'm going to do most of my work over in Notepad++, and then it will come back and we can do a refresh and you can see that it works here as well. All right, so switching over to Notepad++, and then we'll bring up the editors as we need, but now we're all set to code. All right. So let's talk about HTML. All right, so definitely going to be on a test. What does the HTML stand for? And the answer is Hypertext Markup Language. And it is a language that's overseen by the W3C, which we talked about. Again, if you're interested in the actual rules for HTML, you can go to this website, a little bit different than W3 Schools, and look up all the standards. They also have the draft versions of version 6 out there already if you want to look at those so you can see what's coming. But HTML, because it's a markup language, and we talked about this in the first chapter, a markup language, its intent is to take the content that you create and put markers around it so we know what it is and how to put it on a screen or print it to a page. So anytime that we put tags around something, we think of it as an element that goes inside the tag. There's the opening and the closing tags. So we have the greater than and less than symbol on the keyboard. Those are the shift of the comma and the period key. And believe it or not, you do get used to doing shift, bracket, and technically we call these brackets. Left bracket, right bracket, to create a tag. Currently, we're teaching HTML5. That's the running standard version of HTML. It's been our standard since 2014. That really makes it one of the longest lasting HTML standards. Like in the past, sometimes they would change every couple of years or whatever. Another thing I always like to point out is HTML5. The one that came right before it was not HTML4. We talked about this last week too. There was actually a different version called XHTML1 and 1.1 that preceded it. And prior to that, it was HTML4. So we went 4, XHTML, and then HTML5. Good thing is all the stuff that worked in any of the older versions works perfectly in HTML5 without changing it. So HTML5 is really a kind of a cool thing. Google was a really big proponent of a lot of the HTML5 features, and one of the reasons I think Google got really big is they used HTML5 stuff before it was official and got everybody kind of over to their camp of like the new way to do web. And it worked, because it was good. What makes it special? All the modern browsers support it. In fact, all of them are standardized on it at this point. You notice how they still have XHTML kind of bundled in there, right? So it really has not gone away. It's just part of HTML5. There's a lot of new stuff added to it in the form of what we call the HTML5 API. API, by the way, is an acronym that stands for Application Programming Interface, meaning somebody wrote a whole bunch of code that you can access if you just know the right keywords. So for example, in the old days, if I wanted to put a video on a web page, it was like a whole thing, right? I'd have to write all this special code, then I'd have to have backup code, and then I'd have to make sure the person had the right plugin for the browser, and that the video was in the right format, and it was a nightmare. And half the time it didn't work. And then HTML5, they came up with the video tag. And you just basically put the link to a video or drop it in your folder or whatever and put the video tag in, and it just works. The player's built right into the browser. No special code is needed. No special plugins are needed. So that's some of the advancements. Other things, for example, like local storage of data is part of HTML5. The geolocation thing. So why did that come about? Well, our phones, basically, right? So if you're on the web and you get a website that says, hey, I want to know your location. And sometimes you say no, but sometimes you want to say yes. Like if you're in a mapping app, for example, you want to say yes, otherwise it won't map you. But that's built into the standard too. So really some pretty advanced stuff. All you have to know is the right terminology to use it. Now, we talked about this last time and we demonstrated this. And I'm going to start right here. And let's go to our coding editor, whatever tool you're using, and we're going to write our first little snippet of HTML officially. We're going to create the doc type declaration. Now, depending on the tool that you use, some tools will type this all uppercase, some will type it all lowercase, and frankly, it doesn't matter, right? But we do this, and I always forget, and somebody's going to call me on it, I know, is the exclamation at the beginning. So you're supposed to do this. And I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see it clearly. But this is called a doc type declaration. And this really extends from our parent markup language called XML. And so what this is a declaration saying, hello, I'm an HTML5 document. See, it says so right there. Now, it doesn't have a 5 back here, right? Like that. But when you just say exclamation, doc type, HTML, HTML5 is implied, Okay. And that tells the browser or whatever device is receiving the page, this is the rule set we're following. Please render my pages according to that set of rules. And hopefully it does so correctly, right? And part of that is you writing the code correctly. So this is required at the top of every web page. And any web page that you look at online that's correctly built will have a doc type declaration. Now, that's not to say, though, that these declarations were always simple, right? And I think I alluded to this last week. When we had the XHTML doc type, I had to put this at the top of all the web pages I created. You got that? Memorized it? Never, right? And this is the sad reality. The only way you would know how to do this is either you go to W3 Schools and copy it from their site, or you had a file somewhere where you had all the different versions, or you use a product like Dreamweaver that said, create new web page HTML or XHTML or whatever. You picked the version and it did it for you, but you would never memorize that. And so we saw this as a big barrier. W3 saw it as a big barrier. And so when they redid HTML5, they said, let's just make it as simple as possible. And there's the formally defined version. Notice they use all uppercase for doc type. Lowercase works just fine, by the way. Okay. But yeah, and the other thing that's kind of fascinating about these older, longer doc types, so you as a professional, when you go out into the world, you will probably encounter lots of situations where people have these old doc types in here for very specific reasons, legacy applications, but there's some applications that absolutely will not work unless you have a more complicated doc type because it's a lot more rigid. Yeah, notice how these connect to actual very specific documents on the internet with an extension that says DTD, which stands for, by the way, doc type declaration. In the world of XML, that's a formalized document that specifies the rule set for your document. When you create XML documents, you need an auxiliary document called the DTD to explain what your document is. This one, we're using a public one. So even though this simplified doc type doesn't have that long URL in it, it implies the same thing. And there is an actual document you can access on the internet and look at on the W3 site that specifies the rules. So it's not an accident, right? And then when the browsers look at the rule set, they go to that document for the rules. So it's pretty interesting that they thought this kind of deep about it. All right. This is, where we're getting to right now, this is kind of where we got to last week. So this should look pretty familiar for anybody that stayed the session. And we started to do a little bit of coding. And what we're going to do here is we're going to replicate all of this code. But this is really what we call the fundamental structure of a basic web page. And when we create this code, if you're using a manual editor, and I'm just putting it out there for everybody, and you don't want to always recreate the stuff from scratch, you can save a template version for yourself, right? So you can have a basic structure and then you're just copying it, right? So let's go ahead and code through, and I'm going to do it on my screen. We'll get the code going. Once we get that code in, we are going to take our first break, just so you guys know, if you're getting anxious for a break. All right, so I'm working inside of Notepad++ here again, and I kind of have the PowerPoints in the background there as a reference, but I kind of know this stuff also. But once we get past the doc type, the first most important tag is the HTML tag itself. So we start with an open bracket. I type HTML, close the bracket. Right. If you're using Visual Studio Code, the moment you create the opening tag, it will auto create the closing tag for you. You guys notice that if you're using VSC? In Notepad++, you have to do it manually. Now, I have mixed feelings about autocomplete sometimes because I'm not always comfortable with it. I'm okay manually creating it. I'm okay with the tool creating it. The one thing I do recommend to you, and I want you guys to stick this in the back of your brain and think about this, is whenever you're creating a tag manually in any editor, make sure you're closing it right away, because if you forget to close it, it can cause all sorts of problems. So I have this habit: opening tag, closing tag, then put the stuff in between. Don't do opening tag, start typing a bunch of stuff, forget to close it, and then have problems and go, why am I having problems? Why is the whole page italics or bold or something, something you don't want? Okay, so that really defines the very top and the bottom of our whole HTML document. Then we have two other major sections of the page, right? Once again, repeat. You notice that I indented here, and I do this so I can see my hierarchy. Now I'm going to create the head section of the document and create the closing tag right away. So notice how I'm going a couple lines down. So opening head tag, closing head tag, and then right below the closing head tag, I'm going to create the opening body tag, and then do a couple blank lines here, and close the body tag. And you notice the closing tags on these will have the same tag name, right, inside the brackets, but they are preceded with the forward slash. The forward slash is on the same key as the question mark. Now on a keyboard, we have two types of slashes. The forward slash is the one that leans to the right, and the backslash is the one that leans to the left, and the backslash is usually right above your enter key. And so in a Windows operating system, when you're doing file and folder paths, we use backslashes for God knows what reason. Every other operating system does them the other way. And interestingly, when we code HTML, everything is forward slash version, because all of our servers operate that way too, regardless of if they're Windows or Linux. Now, these are, are really encapsulating, HTML encapsulates the whole document. The head section is what I call the non-visible part of the page. It's where we put things like scripts and styles and other things that don't end up on the content part of the page. And the body section of an HTML document is what I think of as the visible part of the page. So the words, the pictures, the videos, all that stuff, the content, is a good way. So content in the body, other things in the head. All right, some things that we have to add to this. So the first thing, let's do this because our book makes it seem like it's super important. I'm going to tell you it's actually not, at least not here in the US, right? Is we're adding to the opening HTML tag what we call a language attribute. So when we add something to a tag, so like whatever the tag name is, like HTML, now I got a space, and then I put in this thing, an equal sign, some double quotes, and some information inside of it. That portion of it is called an attribute. And what we're setting here is the default language for the browser. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week. Thank goodness we're in America, we speak English, and we're gonna probably type up all our pages in English, right? But I did show you last week, or maybe it wasn't this class, maybe it was my capstone class, where it is possible to create multilingual websites. So like, for example, we have a lot of people that speak Spanish, right? And if you speak Spanish, it's not unusual when you go to a Spanish or a Hispanic website that they will often offer English or Spanish, And if you go to a lot of European countries, same thing, right? Like if you're in France, they'll have it English and French, if you're in Greece, it'll be Greek and English. And this merely specifies what the language is when the page loads. So if you have multiple languages declared and set up for it, this will set the default language. Okay, so if we're not doing multiple languages, so can you see why I say it's not necessary? You don't even need it. Right, so, but it's considered good, polite practice because at some point you might want to transition your site to multilingual, and then you're all set up for it. And if you wanted, for example, to have Spanish be the default language because, heck, you're in Mexico or you're in Puerto Rico or something, right? Well, then you change the default language there, and then English becomes the option to switch to instead of the default. Right. The other thing that we're going to do is inside the head section, I'm going to tab in one, and we're going to add the title tag. And the title tag is a really important one because what we put in between the title tag is what ends up on the tab of the browser. So if I switch over to my browser here for a second, if I have one open, those are the words that appear in the tab up here. And as I hover, over the tab, you see all those words that pop up? That's in the title tag of the document. That's where that comes from. So I can control that here in code. And so, Vidal, what's our theme again? House of the Dragon. Right. So that, we got to say it really dramatically too. Maybe we should cue the music. And so those are the first words that are going to appear in the tag, right? And I can make it as long as I want. I think there might be a functional limit to it, but I always tell people the first couple words or two or first two letters are the most important ones. So make sure you get your point across quickly, because what happens when you open up a whole bunch of tabs is usually they condense down and you can't read them anyhow, right? So House of the Dragon. Another thing that's considered essential, and you'll notice our author, I think, has it below the title. I tend to put it above the title, but frankly, it doesn't matter, is this meta tag. I'm going to put mine above the title because that's just my convention, so do as you will. But I'm going to create this new tag called meta. And there's a whole category of these tags, by the way. We will talk about more of them later, but this is considered essential for a page, where we will add an attribute to this, which is character set, CHARSET, equals, and then a set of double quotes, and close the tag, and then inside of it, we're going to say UTF-8. Now, couple different things. I'll talk about the character set second, but first of all, the meta tag itself, I want you to notice that this one does not have a closing tag. Right. So HTML5 does allow for this on a few tags that are considered self-closing. Meta tags are one of those that are considered self-closing. In an XHTML world, we had to do this. This is pretty interesting. We would close the tag like that, and HTML5 allows for that. So we'd put the slash inside the tag and close the tag. So you can do it with that or without. Both are valid in HTML5. You can also go to the trouble of creating the closing tag, and that's also valid, but it's seen as superfluous because you would never put anything in between. So that's the why. So meta tags generally are tags that lend functionality or information to a web page. So either without the closing slash or with the slash is okay. Okay. Now let's talk about the character set. UTF-8 is a collection of keyboard characters, and I don't, in the old version of Windows, I knew how to pull up like the font character map, and I don't know if they still have anything like that. Yeah, probably not. Anyhow, so, but you can actually look at this in Windows somewhere, and I'm not sure how to quickly find it anymore because frankly, I don't care. But I will tell you that the character set of UTF-8 contains most of the world's prominent languages that are European or Middle Eastern based. And we talked about this last time too, right? So English, Spanish, French, Greek, Cyrillic, Russian, Arabic, Hebrew. That covers like most of the big ones, right? And all the characters, so like any of the alphabetic letters, upper, lower case, for any of those are present in that character set. So if you're coding for one of those languages, you're fine, right? It's when you start to go to different languages where you have to sometimes switch to different character sets to be able to get those characters on the screen. Real notably, like if you do certain forms of Chinese, for example, or you're doing kanji, or some other language that I can't even think of, you might have to switch a character set. Very unusual, very unusual. UTF-8 usually covers just about everything. Thank God for us that the British had an empire, where they conquered a lot of places. And then in the aftermath of all of that, the language of business and commerce right now at this point in history is English. And in the European Union, the official language is English. Right. And, biggest users of the internet are those two areas, North America and Europe. I mean, the rest of the world is catching up. But then we also have countries like India, and I'll have you think about this. What's the official language of India? English. That's kind of mind-blowing, right? Because it's 1 point some billion people, the size of China, and they all speak English. Why? Because they were a British colony. They also speak Hindi, right? But it's very interesting. Everybody there who is educated or works or goes to school basically knows English, right? So it's a large percentage of the world population. I always have to kind of tell students this, and this is really kind of a mind blower too. If I was a person in China learning how to code web pages, I want you to think about this carefully, and I know Mandarin Chinese and I don't know English. First, I have to learn English, and then I have to learn how to code. Because if you go to a Chinese website and look at their HTML code, it's in English. Their programming code is in English, right? So we all have an advantage. So straight away, at least we know the language. And if you're Spanish speaking or French speaking or German speaking or something like that, we still use all the same characters of the alphabet, right? For me, I learned Greek first before I learned English. So it was a little bit of a head change to go from like, a sigma to an S, so you have to learn different characters and then think about the coding part of it. So you guys don't have that challenge. You just have to think about the coding. So you're lucky, So yeah. I think it's a pretty important thing, actually. All right. So that's our head section of the document. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a couple things in the body section. We're going to save our document, take a break, and then we're going to take a look. We're not going to take a look before. We're going to kind of have a little bit of a unveiling or whatever. All right. So in the body section, once again, this is where most of our content goes. And what we did in class last week is I started with some real basic tags. One of them is the H1 tag, which is a heading. Level 1 is what that stands for, which is the largest of all the heading sizes. I'm creating an H1 to open and an H1 to close. In between, I'm going to put a title. Now, I'm still working off of the same theme here, and this is now on the page. This is the visible part of the page. So I'm going to create a heading that just says the same as the title, House of the Dragon. Then I'm going to go ahead and create a paragraph. And I really don't have any words for this yet, but I'll get some later, right? Thank you, Internet. I'll do some research and find some words. So I'm just going to say blah, blah, dragons, fire, castles, etc. Right. I'm being kind of lame about this right now. Then I'm closing my paragraph tag like so. One's a heading, one's a paragraph. All right, folks, if you haven't done so yet, Control S to save, or hit the save icon in the file menu or on your toolbar. And let's do a 5-minute break. It's 12:54. Let's come back at, let's make it 1 o'clock even. So I'll see you guys at 1 o'clock, right? Recording's gonna pause, and I'm muting myself here on Zoom. We are now back from break, and we've created this really rudimentary HTML document with like kind of all the basic features of a standard web page. Remember, if you want to go back to like creating a template for yourself, where you could like, if your software doesn't auto create this stuff, what you could do is you could come in here, simply delete what's inside the title, and then this content, save that and call it like template.html, and then you have a starter page, and I think the book kind of recommends that's not a bad thing to do. I will tell you that better pieces of software though, Dreamweaver is a great example, where you just create a new page, you declare the version, hit the button, and it writes out all the standard beginning code for you, right? And I'm a big fan of that. But short of that, having that available, I mean, it doesn't take long to type up. It's not bad practice, but hey, when you're working professionally and time is money, you want to work quickly, so that's one reason why you might want to template things. All right, so now that we have this saved and we're inside of Notepad++. Some of you will notice that Notepad++ has a run option, but you have to configure it. And I'm not always a big fan of using that, frankly, but you can. So you can actually launch it directly to Chrome or Firefox or Safari or whatever your browser is of choice. My preferred method, at least for right now, is to go to the folder where you're storing your work, open that folder, find the file, and double click it and have it come up in the browser. Then to make sure that it's your code that you just created, do a right click somewhere anywhere in the open area, really, of the page, view page source, and then you can take a look at your code. And notice how it's even formatted exactly the same way I had it formatted. Right. And we're not uploading it to the server yet. We're going to do all our work for the day, and then later we will upload to the server. Okay, that's kind of my typical pattern. Right. So there's our rudimentary web page. A lot of stuff really going on here. A lot of basics and important ones. But this is basically what we did. So here's the author's PowerPoint version of this. You have your doc type, your opening and closing HTML tags, the head section of the document, non-visible part of the page, the body section of the document, the visible part of the page, the title, the character set, the language declaration, doc type at the top. Any tag that's open is closed. There is a self-closing tag here, the meta character set, and I guess the doc type is self-closing as well. Author kind of goes through and talks about this. So their definition here is the head section contains the information that describes the web page content. Okay, I can buy that. Describes it. It isn't the content though, right? So that's not a bad way to look at it. And the body section contains text and elements that display in the web page document. So inside the browser window, that's what goes in the body. All right. Now that we just did this, so we kind of built a basic document, went to our browser and loaded it up, and hopefully it worked, right? Nothing super impressive, but you know what? Hey, once you start getting stuff on the screen and you see how easy it is to manipulate it, it becomes pretty cool. All right. So now that we've got a document going, now we can start to learn a little bit more about some of these other tags. Okay, so I'm going to do something kind of interesting here. And I don't know if this will allow me to do it, because I'm kind of a lazy typer. I'll just be real frank. If I don't have to type all that, I'm not going to. And it's not really because I'm lazy. It's because, oh hey, wait, I'm an IT person. Can I copy paste this and save myself a bunch of time? Yes. Duh, right? Why would you not? Okay. Not that there's not value in manually typing things, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just copy this code, and I'm going to go back to my editor here. And this is just an experiment, mind you, right? Because I'm going to show you why. In our body section so far, we put in a heading level 1. And what you noticed with it, like you can see it right here in the background, is that heading is bigger and larger than the regular paragraph text, right? HTML actually has 6 different levels of heading tags, right? The thinking is, with the heading tags, that it denotes important title or section or some sort of delineation within the document that's important, right? And so rather than type all those tags demonstrating, I'm copy pasting them in. Yes, the lazy man's approach, but there you go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. So I'm going to Control S to save, and you guys optionally can do this because I'm not really requiring that you do all 6 levels of this. And then I'm going to come back to my page here. Notice I don't have to double click it again. I can just refresh at this point if it's saved, and that stuff comes up. And you can see how the different heading levels look. All right. And then I'm going to give you my practical opinion on it. Okay, so this is opinion, not rule. What I've seen functionally as a programmer is that I never really go beyond level 3. I don't see much reason for it. Because at that point, this is almost the same size as the regular text. Okay, granted, it's bolder, but when I get down here, I kind of don't see it. I don't see the usefulness of it. But headings level 1 and 2 I use all the time, sometimes a level 3 in professional work. But you do have 6 levels you can choose from. And I think where it may apply is when you have super complicated documents and there's, okay, I want to see all the heading level 5s or something like that, and it's important, right? So there's a demo of all the different levels. From a practical standpoint, I would not use these in a document for the most part. I would probably use heading level 2 though, and I think what I'm going to do is take this one and I'm just going to move it up here. I'm going to put it right under heading level 1. So what's a good tagline for House of the Dragon, Vidal? Winter is always coming. Or how about this? Winter is still coming, right? So that's kind of a thing with the original series. So, all right, I'm going to save this, Control S, back to the browser. And what's the shortcut key? Well, I know I can click here and refresh my screen, right? How else can I refresh? Well, here's a tip. Right click, reload. That's one way, so I'll just go ahead and do it. You can also do Control R as a refresh. Then there's also Control Shift R, which is a hard refresh. And then there's F5, which used to work in all the browsers, but now they're kind of taking it away, right? So it's good to know all those techniques, but this is really common for web work. You come in here, you make a change, Control S to save, switch over to the browser, Control R to refresh, and look at your changes. Right? Really common. And something you're going to do like tons of times before you upload your stuff to the server. Right? Doing your work, put it in there. Okay, refresh. All right, that's good. Let's move on. Right? So that's a technique. So don't forget when you go to the browser, it's not going to auto update. You have to tell it to refresh the screen and look at it. You will run into situations, and this is really important, especially when your file is on the server, where you hit a refresh, you made a change to the document, uploaded it, you hit refresh 5 times and it still didn't update, but you know you put the updated version out there. That's when the Control Shift R comes in, the hard refresh. We'll run into that and I'll show you how and when that's pertinent, but that happens.
What's the difference though?
Okay, well, interestingly, when you hit refresh on your browser makes an intelligent choice. So what it does is it says, you know what? This probably didn't change. I'm not going to refresh it. For example, if I go to like a newspaper website and I pull up today's top stories and, okay, Queen Elizabeth died. I come back in 5 minutes and hit refresh. Chances are the same story is still the headline. And so what your browser does is it looks at your browser cache where it already downloaded all the images and words and loads it up from your own computer, not from the internet. Control Shift R forces it to go back to the server and pull down the latest version, even if it's already there. So refresh does not always refresh. And that's really frustrating when you're coding, by the way. Right? And I don't know if they even mention that in the books, right? So this is like one of those things why it's better like having a real instructor to teach you this stuff, right? And you will encounter that. So if you ever encounter that, do Control Shift R. There's other ways to trigger it too, but we'll get into those later. All right, so that's heading levels 1 through 6, right? And they have a little demo here of that. Then we talked about the paragraph element. And you know, the paragraph is kind of exactly what it sounds like. I consider the paragraph element kind of like the normal text, like the normal words you put on a page should typically go in a paragraph, you know, just the regular old words. Now, it gets kind of interesting working with paragraphs because this is one of these tags that has evolved over time in HTML. So like the old versions, you'd only have to put in a paragraph marker wherever a new paragraph began. You never had to close it. Then they moved to like versions 2 and 3 and they, we better close it. You know, they figured out that that's wiser and I'm glad they did. But that's one of our most commonly used tags for just normal words. there's some weird things that happen with paragraphs, and that's what I'm really going to demonstrate here next. All right, so right now I kind of have some nonsense text in here, blah, 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 whatever, not real words. So it's probably good to get some real words. So let's like not invent any. Let's just go out to the web, and I'm going to type House of the Dragon. I'm going to search that. I'm going to go find the Wikipedia article, right? House of the Dragon Wikipedia looks like I've been here already, and I don't want to invent any content here. I'm just gonna grab this first paragraph. There you go. Right, this is for educational purposes only. I'm not monetizing this. I claim no copyright over it, et cetera, et cetera. It's on Wikipedia, so I consider that kind of like an open internet resource. And I'm just going to paste those words right in here. There might be some junk stuff that follows, but actually not really this time. All right, so I'm going to do a Control S to save. Back over to my browser tab that's got the page open, right? This one, and refresh. And there's the words. Excellent, right? So now it actually has some real information about the website. Generally, what I just did is considered a no-no, by the way, right? Like if you were doing professional web work, you're not going to go to somebody else's site, copy their stuff, paste it in, and claim it as your own. Not cool, and in some cases, highly illegal on top of it, right? I'm pulling from Wikipedia on purpose because they kind of don't care, right? If I went to HBO, though, and pulled their verbiage down, you can bet they're going to have an issue with it. Maybe not, but you can bet they're going to have an issue with it, especially if I'm trying to monetize it. So there's money to be made. We want our share, right? You know, so that's stuff you have to think about. Why is it that my online people don't tell me that I'm not sharing the screen, or am I sharing the screen? You guys can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can.
Okay. Sometimes I have like a highlight, and I lose the highlight, and I'm not sure if it's sharing. So, all right. So let's add another paragraph, and this is important because I want to show you what happens when you start having multiple paragraphs in a document. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my paragraph tag. So opening paragraph tag, lowercase p, closing paragraph tag, lowercase p. I'm going to insert my content here. I'm just going back to Wikipedia, yes, by the way, and I'm going to grab the next paragraph since they've so kindly provided it for us. I'm just going to copy that, paste it in, Control S to save, back to the browser, and refresh. So here's my second paragraph. A couple of really important things to notice in what's happening here. Do you guys notice that as I create the heading tags, it's still using the same font, Times Roman or whatever is default for the browser, and the heading tags are bigger and bolder. I have a little more space around them. A little space above, a little space below. Same thing happens with the heading tag level 2, right? A little bolder, not quite as bold as the one, a little space above, a little space below, and then we do our paragraph. And what we can't really tell here is this is our normal text size, is that there's a little space above the paragraph and a little space below. And then when the next paragraph comes about, it's the same thing, a little space above, a little space below. And if I keep doing that, all my paragraphs will always have a space in between them, right? So what that tells you is some of these elements already have some styling components added to them by default in the basic HTML definition. And it's been this way forever. But paragraph text is really what we consider the normal text of an HTML document. If you're curious, okay, so I am zoomed in here, so I'm at 175%. Normally, this is full size on my screen. So I have it's a full HD 1920 by 1080 pixels, right? And at 100% zoom level, that's kind of small, right? So I zoom in for class so you guys can see it. But the normal font size for a browser, if you don't change the browser settings, is what we call a 16 pixel font, not point, but pixels. 16 pixels tall for a capital letter by default for a paragraph text. Default font is Times Roman in most browsers, You can override those settings, but those are the defaults, right? And basic HTML will display to those defaults as you get started. I'm going to zoom back in so we can see it. All right, back to the PowerPoint here. Now we're going to learn about this kind of handy little tag, and this is another one of these self-closing tags. It does not require a closing tag, but it has a closing tag option, by the way. And this is a line break element. So for example, I have some text here. It says House of the Dragon, blah, 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 blah. And then, okay, well, I can put in a BR tag right here. So it's a line break. It's right after 2019, right before with. I'm going to save this and then watch what happens here. So this is the spot in the document. I'm going to leave it highlighted and I'm going to refresh. So the line break says to the text, from this point on, move to the next line. But you notice that it doesn't create as much space as a paragraph. It's just, yeah, it's just moving it to the next. It's like if you're typing a paper on your computer and you pressed enter to go to the next line. That's what that is. That's a line break. Paragraph has a space in between. Interestingly, if I want to simulate a paragraph without actually creating a paragraph, I can do two line breaks in a row. So there's an example of that. And then watch the refresh. So it looks like a separate paragraph, but this is all inside the same paragraph tag. And isn't that interesting that I don't have to do the line breaks in the code? Like, in other words, I don't have to move this down, right? I just left it where it was, and I did the line breaks in line, as we call them, and it moved the text down. And I think this is really a bizarre thing and hard to wrap your head around. But if I did something like this, wanting to achieve the same effect, so here I am in the middle of a paragraph and I press enter like 2 or 3 times, like that's going to look better moved down. And then I save it. So there's my save. Back to the browser and refresh. And what happens here? Nothing. Yeah. Okay. To prove to you that the code actually worked, let's look at the output. Right. This is the view source. This is what the browser is receiving. The white space is there. Isn't that fascinating? It's the white space is present, but it's not reflected in the document. So this is a really important thing about HTML, you guys. White space in an HTML document is ignored. Only one space that you type at the keyboard will be rendered. Anything beyond will not be rendered. So watch this. This is really a good way. So this weird name, Sapochnik, right? Right after it, there's a space in between these two words, one space. See, I'm like arrowing back and forth. Now I'm going to add a bunch of spaces. Save it. Back to the document. Refresh. Nada. Right click, view source. It's there. The browser ignores it. So what's the browser reading? It's reading the tags, not what you put in the actual document in terms of spaces and carriage returns. It's the tags that make the content do its thing.
So that's exclusive HTML?
Well, it's not exclusive HTML. It's how HTML operates. Right. So there's people like, why the hell would they do that? That makes no sense, right? Well, here's the why. The why is because we set up code on the screen so it's easy for us to read. The computer reads it a different way and puts it on the screen the way we told it. You know, so sometimes we'll create space in the document for our own selfish personal reasons. You know, for example, like right now we're looking at this and the code on this line actually goes off the edge of the screen. Notice that? That's not really good for us to read. Right? So in our code editors and on the view source window, we can line wrap and make it come down. In the browser though, it did that automatically. So it's another kind of, extension of that. So white space is functionally ignored. Only one space is rendered. If you're doing a carriage return, you have to specify it with a tag. Or if you're doing a separate paragraph, you specify it with a tag. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but as long as you kind of follow like some really basic principles, I mean, this really shouldn't be an issue. Like, so most people wouldn't add this space in there anyhow. But sometimes you might have a functional reason for your own purposes to separate things just so you can see it better, right? Especially if it's a lot of text that's continuous. All right. Let's move on. Here's another tag that's kind of neat, and this extends from kind of like the old days of like paper writing. So I'm going to need another paragraph of text, you guys. So let's go back to Wikipedia and see what we can find here. Seems like a lot of. Okay. Let's just take this text here. All right. This is a description of one of the episodes. And I'm going to go to my HTML document now, and at the very bottom, below the last paragraph, but above the body tag. So everything's still going inside the body tag. I want you to notice that because that's where it's visible. Now I'm going to create a block quote tag, and I'm going to close it right away. In between the block quote, opening and closing tag, I'm going to paste in my text. And of course, it jumped off the screen, but here I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see it. So there's all the text I just brought in. And let's first talk about what a block quote is. When you're writing a formal paper, like, so if you guys take like an English class, and I know most IT people are not too keen on that, but you know, it's good to know how to read and write English. And whenever you have a direct quote from an outside source, so this is actually a really good example. So whenever you have a direct quote from an outside source, you're supposed to put quotation marks around it, and then a citation at the end that says where you got it from. You know, like, you know, Jones, page 56, or if it's an online thing, the link or something like that. When your quote exceeds 4 lines of paper length, like fills 4 lines of text, you're supposed to use a block quote instead, which separates it as a paragraph, puts a little space above and below it, and also squeezes it in from the margins. And so let's pretend like this is a giant block quote. I'm going to put double quotes around the whole thing, like that. I don't know if that's really appropriate. And then at the end, I would say like Wikipedia, you know, link, blah, 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 you know. So just pretend like I have a link there. I really don't want to go to the trouble right now. All right, so there's an example of that. I'm saving this, and let's bring that up in the browser now. So we go back to the browser, refresh. You will see the block quote is added, but notice it is indented from the left. It's harder to tell on the right, but it's also indented on the right. And that's what you're supposed to do with the paper. Real frankly, I use this very seldomly in professional work, honestly, right? The thought why this is an important tag is because a lot of people do create content that's kind of like book-like or paper-like online, and this is just a mechanism to control the styling a little bit. Right? But that's considered one of those fundamental tags. Right, a bunch of other tags that are kind of interesting, and real frankly, this is but a small smattering of what's possible. Your book has a more comprehensive list, but in the PowerPoint here, they kind of chose certain ones to demonstrate. And I think most of these are good ones to demonstrate because I think they're fairly useful. So I'm going to go through each one of these and show you how they work. Right? These are all what we call these phrase elements. Some people will call them inline tags. We haven't learned what that means quite yet. But it's usually tags that we add to text that is already inside of some other structure, like a paragraph. Okay, so let's go one at a time here. The first 2 that I'm going to demonstrate, and I'm going to do these kind of in pairs, is the bold tag. Okay, so let's do that. So right here I have the words House of the Dragon, and I think that's important, okay? So right before that piece of text, I'm going to add an opening tag with the letter B, go to the end of what I want bolded, and do a closing letter B, right? So I'm marking House of the Dragon to be bold, just like you would like with a word processor. You highlight it, hit the bold button, and it becomes bold. That's basically what we're doing. When the XHTML thing came out, they thought the bold and italic tags were stupid, real frankly, right? They were like, those are stupid, they mean nothing. So instead they came up with an alternative to bold called strong. And you can use these interchangeably, by the way. So we'll put that around American. So opening and closing strong tags. I'm going to save this back to the browser, quick refresh, and notice House of Dragon and American are both bolded. This was done with the B tag. These were done with the strong tag. It is assumed that they have different meanings. So the reason they came up with strong is to show that something is more important, where bold is more of a formatting thing. So you kind of see the difference. In HTML5, they decided both was valid, were valid, so you can use those interchangeably, basically. Depends on your preference. From a practical standpoint, I go for the bold tag. Why? One letter to type instead of 5 or 6 or whatever, you know. So that's just how I think. Take that for what it's worth. The other one that's kind of done in pairs like this is the italics. And the old school, and then now I guess new school way, is to do a letter I. So opening and closing I tag for italics. And then the alternate is M for emphasis. And ask me why, I mean, like who thought of these things, but that's what that stands for. So we're emphasizing something. So we'll close and open the M tag. You see how I put it around those guys' names, right? So let's save that back to the browser, refresh, and you see George R.R. Martin is now italicized, and Ryan Condal for HBO is now italicized. With the first one I used the I tag, the second one I used the M tag. They do, they're exactly the same. The outcome is the same, but we have two ways of doing it. Yeah, you know, and that's a good distinction, honestly. All right, so we've covered 4 of these already. Now we're going to let's do the mark tag. That's kind of a fun one, and this not one I really use too often, but I totally see a place for it. Maybe I want to make this highlighted yellow, like I took a highlighter and marked the text, and sometimes that's actually useful on a website, I've discovered. And so I'm going to go into my code. I guess let's do this. Dance of the Dragons, that would probably look good that way. So I'm going to put a mark tag in front of it and a mark tag at the end, closing it. Now spell them both correctly, right? If you spell one incorrectly, they're not going to work, by the way. And this is for highlighting. I don't know why they didn't call it highlight, but hey, whatever. I didn't invent it, they did. Refresh, and there's the highlight. All right. Some more that are kind of useful. Here's one, and I'm not really a big fan of using this, and I will tell you that they actually have a whole range of commands that you can use that are like small, extra small, large, extra large, I think is how it goes, that take the font and do a relative sizing of it. Now, the reason I'm just saying this up front, the reason I'm not a big fan of that is because there's better ways to control the size of a font. But in a quick scenario, you just want to make something a little bit smaller or a little bit larger, you can do it with these. So small's not the only one. There's small, there's large, extra small, extra large, and I think there might be an extra of each as well, you know. All right, so let's try small, and maybe a really good, I don't know. Let's make October small. So I'm gonna go small, and then put a closing tag after it. Small. Saving, back to the browser and refresh, and we gotta find where that is. There it is, I saw it change. See how it's just a little bit smaller? You can barely even tell. But there might be times where you're doing something and that's appropriate, right? You want something a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, you can call that out. Not a big fan. Better ways to change your font size. Right, moving on. Okay, so we have sub and super. Those are pretty handy. Here's a really good example. So like this citation here might look good as a subscript, where the text is a little smaller and then move down a little bit. So I'm going to put around this one, sub. So opening and closing sub. And then here I'm going to put this is kind of weird because I'm adding it in. I'm going to put this 2 in here, but I'm adding this code for super, which is superscript, which raises it up and makes it smaller. And you'll see what I mean when you see this. Once again, I some of this, how much you would practically use it, I really don't know. But to see that it can be done. So here's a superscript. See how the 2 is raised up? And then here's a subscript where the text is lowered down. So if you're looking for that effect, it's achievable. Right. What you guys will notice in the HTML5 basics assignment is that I have lists of all the tags you guys should use in your code. Now, if you guys are following along with me, which you should be, right? You should be coding along with me, hopefully. You're basically already doing the work. It's kind of like, the tip. All right, let's move on. A lot of stuff to cover. Another thing that really kind of becomes kind of interesting about using tags in HTML, and this takes a little bit of practice, especially at first, is this concept of what we call nesting tags inside of each other. So for example, here they have a demonstration of a whole paragraph, right? So you see the opening paragraph tag and the closing paragraph tag. And the text inside of there, I want it all to be italic. So, and the key to coding it is in how I just said that. So if you're paying attention to the words because the words matter, all the text inside that paragraph should be italic. So when I declare it to be italic, the italic symbol should start inside the paragraph and end inside the paragraph, not after. So that way, all of the italicized text is encapsulated in the paragraph. It's nested inside the paragraph. And then part of that text, they want it to be bold, the phone number. So they're using the strong tag, not the bold. But notice that since that's part of the paragraph, that's also inside the italics and inside the paragraph. So I couldn't take, for example, the closing tag and put it over here. That's not really technically correct. Here's what's kind of weird about this though. Like when you first start to do this, what'll happen is you will make the mistake, not intentionally, it just happens, right? That you put, let's say the italics tag is outside the paragraph mark, and you bring it up in the browser and it looks fine. And you'll grade it and say, oh, it's wrong. And you go, but it looks fine. And I'm like, but it's wrong. And here's the why. Right now it works because we're doing nothing complicated. But as we start to add JavaScript code and styling code, things will break, right? If it's not set up correctly. And when you take it to the validator will say it's not nested correctly or yada, yada, yada. You're missing a tag or, then good luck deciphering it. But that's something you watch for in advance. What I haven't pointed out with these text editors, and you will kind of discover this in your own ultimately, is these text editors that work with code. Like watch what happens when I click on the block quote tag and single click. Notice how it highlighted the closing tag that goes with it? All the better editors do this. So I hit the sub tag, there's the closing tag. So did I close it? That's a great way to check to see if you open and close tags. The other thing that's kind of neat is whenever you have like major markers like a paragraph, a lot of the tools will have these little expander minus and plus sign or arrow things that like twist and turn and open up. So like if I don't want to look at this paragraph, I can actually collapse it. That doesn't seem like it's collapsing because there's not a lot to collapse there, right? But it is actually collapsing down, and you can do that with entire sections of the document to kind of get them out of the way as you're working. But it's just another way to know if your tags are open and closed. Do they have a pair? You know, are things properly nested? You know, that those tools are there for you. You know, so just be aware. Every tool or every piece of software you use is going to handle it a little bit differently, but ultimately that nesting becomes really important. Anybody have any questions so far with what I've covered? And then after we do this next section here, by the way, we'll do another break, you know, if you guys are wondering. All right, so we're moving on now to list structures inside of HTML. And these are kind of interesting because they're useful in a lot of different ways. And in some capacities, they're still really important for navigation structure and things like that. But somebody, when they were developing HTML, pretty wisely saw the fact that it's kind of nice to be able to create like lists of things, like bullet lists or numbered lists. And so they built that into HTML right off the bat. So those are the unordered list and the ordered list. Unnumbered and numbered is how that goes. And then we have this newer one called description list. So I'll demonstrate these first, and we'll come back and look at kind of like the results of it in the aftermath. So I'm going to go right to the bottom of my document here under the block quote, and I'm going to create a UL. Okay, this stands for unordered list. All right, here's the closing UL. And then in between, I'm going to put list items. So for example, I'm going to tab in, I'm going to create a LI, list item, close it, LI. I'm not sure what my list is going to be quite yet, real frankly, but I'm going to have more than one thing on my list. I'm going to copy that code, the opening and closing tags, and just paste it in like 3-4 times, something like that. All right. Now, maybe for an unordered list, I'm not really sure what would be good, but maybe we can talk about something from the show. You know, so this is like if this is why you need to have like a theme for your website, because then when you're doing this stuff, you have something to work with, right? So I don't remember any of the like names from the show or how to spell them.
Kids, maybe.
Yeah, like. Well, the only one I remember is Rhaenyra and Daemon, and that's kind of like, yeah, because it's, yeah. Okay, how about we do this? Son 1. Son 2. And how about this? This ties into last night. Bastard son. Not intending to swear here, but that's what they call people that are born out of wedlock. So, whatever, you know, I'm just throwing stuff in there just to show you how this works. The other really similar structure, and I'm doing these both at the same time because it just saves us a little bit of time. Notice I'm copying this whole structure, right? Highlighted it. I'm doing a Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to come down here, make a blank line, and paste it back in. And then I'm going to change the UL, watch this, to an OL for ordered list. I'm doing that both on the opening and closing tags. So this is unnumbered, this is numbered. Okay, do a Control-S to save, and then go back to your browser and take a look at what you've created. So here is an unordered list. Notice generic bullet points. Here's an ordered list that is numbered. Okay. Real common uses for this stuff, I mean, whenever you're making lists, right? I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer. But real interestingly, the UL structure, historically, before we had like visual web pages, was often used for navigation. You know, so that's a thing, right? So people would create unordered lists of navigation links, and a lot of people still do that, and then take those lists and convert them to all the fancy menus through CSS that we see on a lot of web pages. So that's unordered list and ordered list at the same time. Question I often get, can you change the bullets, right? Can I have square bullets or round bullets or bullets that look like bullets or, you know, whatever? The answer is yes. There's CSS code that you can type where you can change the appearance. There's also code that you can type that instead of using numbers, uses letters or Roman numerals or whatever, you know, so all of this stuff is actually tweakable, but the defaults are what you see on the screen. The other one that's kind of interesting, a little more modern, is the description list. And this is one that I think perplexes students a little bit more because of the way that it's kind of structured. Because this has, instead of 2 components, it has 3 components. And so the 3 components are listed here on the slide. So the DL is kind of the parent structure. It's like what holds all of it, like UL or OL does, right? So we have a DL. And then inside the DL, we have a definition title and a definition description, or definition term and definition description. I'm not really sure the right way to say that. There's the DT and the DD, right? The thinking is that what you're creating is something that looks like down here in the corner. So this bottom part of the screen here. So you have like the thing you're defining. So we're trying to define internet protocol, and then the DD is slightly indented, right? So you kind of create this like hierarchy without bullets or numbers. And then this is a DT, and that's its definition, right? Now I don't want to type this, so yeah, I'm going to copy paste this into my code. You guys should type it, builds character. I'm totally kidding. If you have the capability to copy paste it from the PowerPoint, please do, right? So I'm just going to paste it in. I am going to do some indenting here just to kind of clean this up. So this is how I see the indenting on it. You can take that for whatever it's worth, because the computer doesn't care, right? So we have the outer structure, which is the DL, right? Then we do a DT, and then a related definition, and I indent the definition because that's kind of how it comes out on the screen, right? And then I do the same thing, a DT and a DD. And maybe like here, like if we were, this might be like a good example for like a list of characters, right? So like if I knew like all the character names and like a little bit about them, I would maybe put like the character name here, and then they're like their short description here, right? Let's go ahead and save this. And once again, look in the browser. But you see how that process repeats over and over again? So that's what that looks like. So UL, OL, DL, right? And at this point, you know, you might not see a lot of functional use for this stuff on your page, and maybe there isn't, but maybe you're like, oh my God, that would be perfect for, you know, whatever it is you're doing. So like, you know, I get a lot of people who are interested, for example, in like video gaming, and they want to do a video game website. And if the game's got characters, this might be a really good way to, you know, do exactly what I just said. So that's a DL, folks. All right, we're kind of reaching a point now where I think I'm going to stop this video, and I do this on purpose because I noticed that when I was looking at my topics list before, so this is by design, last time I ended the video here, right on this topic, and then we start a new one. It's also a good spot for a break. So we're going to stop this video. I'm going to start a fresh one when we come back, but we're on 5-minute break again. If you guys I'm going to take a break. So it's 1:47. Let's try to get back by 1:52, 1:53, something like that. All right. See you soon.